Thank you all for joining us. We'll be starting in just a few minutes. Thank you for coming. Okay, thank you guys. Thanks for coming. We're going to go ahead and get started, but we definitely appreciate everyone who's here in the audience and people who are joining us via Zoom. Let's go to the presentation slides, and then we'll work through those and do our introductions with everyone. So if we wanted to go to that first slide there, we are doing this in a hybrid fashion because we want people to give people the opportunity to learn, but also to be able to ask questions and get responses and answers to their questions. We are also going to be, next slide, going to be recording the meeting tonight. And we're recording that because if people are not able to attend either remotely or in person, we're going to post it to our website so that people who aren't here can hear the same information and get the same information before they go out and vote. Next slide. I wanted to introduce myself. Obviously, I'm Dante Hall. I am the city manager here for the city of Hercules, and I wanted to give our other panelists the opportunity to just briefly introduce themselves, and then we'll go and get into the content. So let's start with Mike Roberts, and then we'll go on to the other panelists.
Thank you, Dante. Good evening. My name is Mike Roberts. I'm the Public Works Director, City Engineer for the city.
We have Ed Espinosa, who's joining us remotely. Ed?
Good evening, everybody. My name is Ed Espinosa with Francisco and Associates, and our firm assists the City of Hercules with the annual administration of its 5 landscape and lighting assessment districts.
And Jeff?
Jeff Brown, I'm the Public Works Superintendent for City of Hercules.
And Ben Fay?
Good evening. I'm Ben Fay of Jarvis and Fay, and I'm a lead attorney, specialize in government revenues, and I'm providing legal advice here, particularly on Proposition 218 and the procedures for assessments.
Thank you. And also in the audience, we have JR from Pacific Site, who is our contract landscaper in case any type of landscaping issues or questions come up this evening. So thanks again for being here. We definitely appreciate your participation and your willingness to listen to us and also to ask questions about what's going on. It's going to be an opportunity for people to learn about the lighting and landscaping districts, the assessments, the 218 process, but most importantly, it gives us the opportunity to hear your questions and things we can clarify or things that aren't absolutely clear. It gives us the opportunity to do that. Next slide, please. And so we will be providing a brief presentation tonight on the landscaping district overview. We'll talk a little bit about the levels of service, why it matters, and then a proposed resolution and how that will work for the 218 process, how to vote. And then, like I said, most importantly, we're going to be talking about the questions that you have or you may have tonight. We know that there's a lot of questions that we've been hearing about, and so now is the opportunity for us to directly answer those for you. Next slide, please. So we have about an hour tonight that we're going to be having the meeting, doing the presentation and responding to questions, and this is a hybrid approach. So the people who are here in the audience, we're asking you to fill out speaker cards, and at the end of the presentation will be our Q&A, and we'll open it up for people, and we'll call you to come on up and ask your question or make your comment. For people who are visiting us or participating via Zoom, we ask that you actually utilize your raise hand feature on Zoom. And once again, during that time after the presentation, when we go to the Q&A, we'll call you or let bring the people who have questions on Zoom up to answer any questions that you may have. And we have a hard stop at about 8 o'clock here. And so any questions that we get that we weren't able to answer, we'll be happy to answer those. Please email us. We'll be happy to follow up with you and answer those questions for you. And again, like I said, this meeting is going to be recorded and it'll be posted to our website, LLAD.com, which provides all of the information, previous events, previous information for anyone who's interested in the subject to really learn about it and understand. Next slide, please. So this is our city council mission. Victoria by the Bay is one of the most beautiful neighborhoods in the entire city. There are many neighborhoods that are beautiful, but Victoria by the Bay, no one can doubt that that's a beautiful neighborhood with high property values. And what we do, we try to live out City Council's mission and vision for the city within our means. We have limited resources, but we definitely try to provide the best service that we can within our means. One of the big things that council has made a point to put into their mission and vision statement are things about transparency. And that's partly what we're here tonight to talk about. We really have to find a solution because the problem is that the costs for the district are outpacing the revenues that's generated. And so tonight, what we want to do is talk about some possible solutions and hear from you essentially about what you think about that or any clarifying questions that you might have. So we're looking forward to hearing from you tonight. And with that, we'll start off our presentation. And I'm going to turn to our Public Works Director, Mike Roberts, to start the presentation.
Thank you, Dante. Next slide, please. So there are 5 lighting and landscaping assessment districts, or LLADs as they're called, in Hercules, which encompass the entire city. Virtually all 8,000 plus parcels in Hercules are in one of these districts. And the LLADs provide for the maintenance of our city's streetlights, parks, roadway landscaping, and open spaces. The 3 primary services provided by the LLADs through annual assessments paid by property owners are street lighting, landscaping, and upkeep of park amenities. This is important because well-maintained landscaping, lighting, and parks keep our neighborhoods attractive and safe. Next slide, please. So this slide is a map of the district boundaries. One of the first things to note is what's not included in the district, which all the way to your left is Shoreline Park. So this includes the restrooms, swing set, play equipment, as well as the walkway and arched open space leading out into the bay. Also not included is San Pablo Avenue. That is included in our major roads. As I said before, the district does have about 8,000 homes in it. And the amenities include streetlights, which are shown in the little yellow circles, neighborhood parks labeled Victoria Park and Arbor Park, as well as street landscaping on major roads, which is Victoria Crescent West and East, and a portion of Craftsman in the thicker green, and then residential streets in the thinner green you see. It does not include the HOA areas. So the HOA areas generally are the sloped areas between rows of homes and also on the hillsides around the perimeter of the property. Next slide, please. So going into some detail now of the amenities in the district are as follows. First, there are 245 LED streetlights. These are the decorative post top lights. They anchor the streetscape by providing an attractive focal point, synergize with the similarly covered and styled mailboxes, street signs, and posts to help weave all of the landscaping elements together. The LED conversion from high-pressure sodium occurred over a decade ago, and LED has long operational life, improved energy efficiency, which means lower cost, and are also relatively maintenance-free, which isn't to say that they don't need maintenance. We recently did an audit. We found 8 lights were on 24 hours a day because their photocell had burned out, so we fixed half of them. Additionally, we had 1 light on Waverly Circle, which wasn't working. It turned out it had a burned out fuse, which has been replaced. It's important because adequately lit streetlights maintain safe neighborhoods and improve visibility of the property frontage at night, keeps the streets safe for drivers and pedestrians alike, and at night or bad weather, drivers and pedestrians can better see one another, traffic signs, and bicyclists. Next slide, please. The district also maintains, as I mentioned, the collector streets. So this would be the entire corridor in the right-of-way, including Victoria Crescent West, Victoria Crescent East, and Craftsman. If you look at the photo to your upper left, this is Victoria Crescent East. What's maintained specifically is after the curb, you have the grass turf strip, the trees, then you have the sidewalk, and then you have ground cover and shrubs. Next slide, please. So on residential streets, the district maintains the planter strip between the sidewalk and curb. This is in front of approximately 800 homes. You can see this from the photo on the left, where you see the curb, the turf, the tree, and then the sidewalk. Within the district are 4,950 trees, 13 species in all. They provide shade in the summer and help cool the neighborhood, saving costs on air conditioning, and the deciduous trees shed their leaves and that light in during winter. Now, the turf is especially durable and green and lush, but as will be discussed later, is also water thirsty and very difficult to irrigate. Next slide, please. So of the 2 parks, the first one is Arbor Park. It's 3.4 acres. It's a linear park starting at Trellis Bay, South Arbor Bay, with the gazebo, which you can see at your lower left. And then as you go around the photos counterclockwise, the park pathway meanders along past benches, landscaping, as you see the rose and the maple, and then behind it, the redwoods on the upper right, and then arrives at the pergola above the staircase, which overlooks the obelisk monument and views of the San Pablo Bay and Marin, and ends at Victoria Crescent West. Next slide, please. So the second park is Victoria Park. That's 3.4 acres, 750 feet long, a linear park as well. It splits Victoria Park Drive from Victoria Crescent West to Shoreline Park. And in addition to the most visible feature, which is the obelisk monument, it includes tree, grass, shrubs, walkways, benches, and some enclosed areas. And at this point, I'd like to turn the presentation over to Ed Espinoza.
Thank you, Mike. Next slide, please. As the city's Public Works Director just described, the maintenance services provided by the Victoria by the Bay Landscape and Lighting Assessment District are quite extensive. The district has been around since 2002, and what has happened over time is maintenance costs has exceedingly surpassed the allowable revenue that can be collected, which brings us to the present day picture. Next slide, please. The slide that you see before you is what is projected for upcoming fiscal year 24-25. As you can see on the right-hand side, the anticipated maintenance cost is approximately $707,000 with an allowable revenue collection of about $534,000, which creates a deficit, a projected deficit of $173,000, or approximately 25% of the overall budget. Next slide, please. This operating deficit isn't unique to fiscal year 24-25. As you can see on this line graph, it's the deficit has been in place in recent years and is expected to continue, which, if nothing is done, creates an unsustainable fiscal projection. Next slide, please. So what are the primary drivers for the increase in maintenance costs? The first is maintenance needs in general. Trees have matured throughout the community, which has resulted in the need for implementing tree trimming, periodic tree trimming, and tree replacement. The city has also had to use basket trucks versus having the ability to utilize a landscape company, which would previously trim the trees from the ground. So as you can imagine, this increased need has also resulted in an increase in costs. Next slide, please. Environmental changes has also been a major driver for the increase in costs. Hotter climate and more extreme weather has resulted in a need for increased watering. Next slide, please. The cost of utilities has risen significantly over the past 5 years. East Bay Mud and PG&E utility rates has significantly surpassed the allowable revenue that can be collected. As an example, East Bay Mud's water rates has almost doubled in the last decade. Next slide, please. With that, I'll turn it over to the city's maintenance supervisor, Jeff, to elaborate on why this matters.
Next slide. Victoria by the Bay is currently has very extensive landscaping, and a large amount of that is turf. We want to explain to everybody tonight what the possibility of the future cuts or keeping things static could mean to the landscaping and the landscaping levels and the lighting levels in the park, in the development. Next slide. Lighting, landscaping, keeping it at its current levels and keeping it looking really well can have major effects on both safety and the home values within the district, and keeping the overall appeal and aesthetics and desirability of the neighborhood and the property. With that, I'll be turning it back to Ben Fay.
Thank you. So legally, what is required if there's a decision to increase the assessments? And that's provided by Proposition 218, which is a provision of the California Constitution, and it provides that assessments can only be increased with the approval of the property owners. There's a vote, and you have to have a majority of the weighted vote. The vote is weighted based on how much each property owner would be paying, and there has to be a majority in order for that for a proposed increase to be actually adopted. And I'll pass it on, I think, to Mike.
Yeah, thank you, Ben. So as far as the efforts from the city so far, that is how we got to where we're at today. If we could go to the next slide, please. So in May 2023, the city completed a 5-year financial projection on all the 5 districts. In focusing on Victoria by the Bay, the 5-year projection showed the operating deficit currently being experienced would not self-correct over in time, but in fact would worsen if unaddressed. The rate at which the deficit was increasing triggered the next event, which was in October 2023, where the city commissioned Baker Tilly to perform an independent third-party audit. This was in effect to look at how the district was being administered. And the audit did not find any smoking gun, if you will. It found the district was being properly administered, but did recommend fixing the operating deficit by increasing assessments through a Proposition 218 process. And this, again, was to get the district's finances in order as the first priority. Following that, it recommended looking at options to replace the turf and the planter strips, given the cost of watering and how difficult it is to water those narrow planter strips. And then in October of 2023, Council authorized a Proposition 218 process in accordance with the recommendations of the Baker-Tilly study. Between those times, there were 2 virtual town halls that were held to inform the public of the situation in the district and answer any questions they may have. And then in December 2023, the public hearing was held with the Prop 218 votes being counted, and it did not pass by a wide margin. 77% voted of the votes were no, and 23% were yes. But because something needs to be done to address the deficit, currently the district is being funded through a de facto loan by the general fund. We're then once again on a track to go through with a Proposition 218 effort this spring, summer. And in April, council authorized a new 218 process, which brings us to this meeting here on May 21, with ballots proposed to be tabulated in the public hearing in June 2024. Next slide, please. And pass this back on to Ed Espinoza.
Thank you. Next slide, please. To eliminate this operating deficit, the city is proposing a 2-step $150 per year increase to the Victoria by the Bay Landscape and Lighting Assessment District, with the first increase going into effect on this upcoming December property tax bill, and a second $150 increase that would go on the fiscal year 25-26 property tax bill. So that's $150 in fiscal year 24-25, and a second $150 increase for fiscal year 25-26, or approximately $12.50 per month. Following fiscal year 25-26, the assessment would be increased by the annual change in the consumer price index to keep up with the cost of inflation as the assessment currently does now. Next slide, please. This table shows the current maximum assessment in the middle column there. So as you can see, for a single family home currently pays $617 per home. If the assessment increase is approved by property owners, it would go up to $767.03 per home. And then in fiscal year 25-26, it would go up by another $150, and the assessment would be $917.03 per home. Next slide, please. With that, I'll turn it over to Ben Fay to explain the voting process.
So as I mentioned earlier, the city can propose an increase in assessment. And what you're hearing this evening is the proposal and why the city believes an increase is necessary. But it's the property owners who get to decide, do they want an increase? The property owners who would pay the increase in the assessment. Next slide. So how do you vote? Property owners should already have received ballots in the mail with notice of a hearing on June 25th, at which the ballots will be counted and the city council will review the ballots. Includes a prepaid envelope in which the ballot can be mailed back. Property owners or their authorized representatives can vote. Next slide, please. Here's a sample of the ballot. It's quite simple, but again, like all ballots, you want to make sure you fill it out correctly because it can be invalidated if it's not done correctly. There are 2 boxes you can check, one for yes, one for no. Sign it, print your name on it, and then importantly, it needs to get back to the city in time to be counted. So if you put it in the mail in the prepaid envelope, make sure you mail it several days before June 25th, so there's no question of it arriving in time. It doesn't count if it's postmarked before June 25th, but doesn't arrive until the 30th. That won't work. If you want to be certain, you can bring it into to the city clerk, drop it off, I think by 5 p.m. on the 25th at the city clerk's office, or you could even bring it to the hearing. And as long as it's turned in before the end of the public hearing, the hearing starts at 7 p.m. it will be counted. You also, if you want to change a ballot that you've submitted, you have up until that time to do that. Next slide, please. So this actually largely covers what I already mentioned already. You want to make sure that you clearly mark the ballot and return it in time, either by mail or by bringing it in person. Next slide. And as I also mentioned, here at the times and dates, it has to be returned by, if you're mailing it in or returning to the city clerk by 5 p.m. on June 25th, or you could bring it to the hearing and turn it in to the clerk before the end of the hearing, which starts at 7 p.m. on the 25th. And as long as you do that, it will be counted. Remember to sign it, check yes or no, and print your name. And with that, I'll pass it back to Mike. Next slide.
Thank you. So in terms of the balloting, a no vote means that the city will discontinue the irrigation and maintenance of the landscaping and the planter strips between the sidewalk and curb on residential streets. So these are streets that have houses facing them. However, the tree trimming will continue to be provided, and the property owner or collectively through the HOA would be able to continue to maintain and water the planter strips if they so choose. Whereas a yes vote would mean the city would maintain all existing services at their current levels: the street lighting, the planter strips, Arbor Park, Victoria Park. This step is necessary to balance the budget, which is running approximately a $220,000 deficit in expenditures altogether. And the only way to realistically achieve that is either to raise rates or, has been mentioned, stop maintaining and irrigating the planter strips. Next slide, please. So in the interest of clear communication here, the planter strip is shown on your left. So it's the left photo. It's the area between the curb and the sidewalk with turf and the tree you see in it. As far as the map on the right, that indicates which streets are the residential streets that would no longer receive maintenance and irrigation in the planter strips. And those are the light green streets. Again, the streets that have houses along the frontage. So the streets shown in blue, those are the major streets, the collector streets. Those would continue to be maintained in their entirety along with both parks. So once again, the property owner could elect to continue mowing the lawn in their front yard off to the planter strip as well, but would need to water it if they so choose, if the measure does not pass. So now back to Ed Espinoza.
Next slide, please. When will the ballots be counted? The ballots will be counted following the close of the public input portion of the public hearing to be held on June 25th of this year. At that time, City Council will receive public testimony and formally accept any remaining ballots to be turned in. Following that period, the ballots will be tabulated in front of council chambers and open, and the tabulation process is open to the public. So any property owner that's interested in the tabulation process can come in and view the process and ask questions at their discretion. Next slide, please. What determines if the proposed assessment increase passes? City Council can only approve the proposed assessment increase if there's no majority protest. A majority protest means that the ballots returned, the ballots that are returned outweigh, that are in opposition outweigh the ballots returned that are in favor of the increase. And the ballots are weighted in proportion to the proposed assessment. So what that means is if a parcel or a property has a higher assessment than another property within the district, the property with the higher assessment has a higher say that is proportional to the proposed assessment amount. If there is a majority protest, the current assessment will stay in place and the increase will not be implemented. Next slide, please. The results of the ballot tabulation are expected to be reported to City Council the same evening as the public hearing on June 25th of this year. Next slide, please. That is the end of our presentation. With that, the team is happy to address any questions residents or property owners may have.
Thank you, Ed. And so, like I said before, it's a hybrid meeting. So people who are here in person, if you can fill out a speaker card, we like to understand and know who was here. Hand it to Shiva. Thank you, Shiva, for joining us. If you're joining us via Zoom, please utilize your raised hand feature, and then we'll call you up in turn. So let's start with the people here. Are there any comments or questions?
Good evening. Yes, I have a speaker card, Mr. Hall. Ms. Cheryl Bennett from Regatta Point. Please, yes, you have a few minutes.
Hi, my name is Cheryl Bennett, and I've lived on Regatta Point for 21 years, ever since it was built. And we have the most strip out in front, and I'm kind of confused why the city decides there's only two options, either raising taxes or abandoning their care of the most strip. What about getting a consultation from some specialist that handles plants and grass and maybe some kind of low growing clover or something that would be needed to be watered maybe, once in a while and weeded once in a while. Every week, the landscapers are out there mowing, and basically what's growing out there right now is weeds, lots of weeds. There's no grass, and it's just, not good for our environment. We should be thinking about the future and conserving water, and perhaps if we had another option that the city could think about, that would really be helpful to the homeowners that are there. And the other comments I wanted to make is that there's been a lot of trees that have been missing for 4 or 5 years, and they haven't been replaced. And that's very disappointing because, as you know, it takes a long time for a tree to grow. So I'd like to know what is the rule for that? When a tree dies and they remove it, when are they supposed to replace it? Yeah, I hear a little echo. So anyways, I think we need to think about the environment and think about some other options for a lot of these grassy areas. Thank you.
Thank you, Ms. Bennett. Those are actually two, excellent points. What I would like to say is when we had the third-party audit completed by Baker Tilly, right behind their recommendation to get the district's finances in order was to change out the water-thirsty, inefficient to irrigate turf with drought-tolerant landscaping, as you mentioned. And we did look into that, and we got an approximate cost of $1,500 per planter strip. So there's roughly 800 planter strips out there. So that equates to roughly $1.2 million. So it would require some upfront capital to do. It's something I think everybody recognizes we need to be working towards in the future. And the purpose here for the assessment increase is to get the district's finances in order first and not let the turf die out there. Certainly, if that's something that the residents want to undertake, the city would be interested, in partnering on that. Regarding the trees, it's been very disappointing that people have been cutting down trees. However, the district doesn't have much money. let me finish and then come up here, please. We do have $25,000 a year in their proposed budget with the assessment increases to begin replacing the trees. And you're welcome to come up to the podium and indicate that we've cut some of them down ourselves.
We had a couple bad storms there. Regatta Point, the wind really blows through there and those trees were knocked down and the city came and removed them. So if you remember when those storms were 4 or 5 years ago, that's how long, there's no trees there. So it's very disappointing because we do pay taxes and, it's a little frustrating. And you know how long they put a little tree there and you got a big tree next to it and it just takes forever to catch up to the other trees.
Thank you. And certainly if trees came down and we remove them, they'll be at the top of the list to get replaced.
Shiva, are there any other raised hands?
Yes, I have Mr. or Mrs. JL. So you're allowed to talk, sir.
Hi, my name is Jocelyn. I actually want to echo what the speaker have said, that it feels like the slide on the no and yes vote, it's like an all or nothing for this. And I understand that there's going to be some capital upfront costs in planter strip. And I wanted to know, how was it decided which ones were going to go first? Was there an outreach? Was it going to be the planter strips between the sidewalk and curb only? Was it looked at for the Victoria Park strip? Because some of them are visible, but those areas are very turf heavy. And what I hear is the cost of the water usage and the rates, it's really what's driving this force. But and not addressing that as part of the whole plan to make us the district financially stable seems like a loss of thought. It's like an all or nothing, vote all of this, but not, or we'll just cut everything between, but nothing. What was the thought on Victoria Park or Arbor Park? How was that? I feel like there's something in the middle. And I also watched the planning commission or the city council meetings, both on October 3rd and the 10th. And I know that one of the commissioners or city council members mentioned that residents like options, but I didn't hear a discussion on options, except these two, an all or nothing. So I'd like to hear about how it was decided on what area was to be cut, why those visible areas and not less, and why not review the CIP? Because if the whole district needs to be financial stable, that should be considered as well, because it's a long-term plan, it's a long-term game. I also wanted to hear about the $5 that was to build capacity for additional staff and the 5 LLDs. Will that be for just this district or the whole total 5 LLDs in the city? And then a last question is, will there be a summary posted of all the questions from the previous Zooms and the summary of response? Because I don't like duplicating. And if there's already a question that I may have thought of, I was hoping to have read it. That's all. Thanks.
Thank you, Ms. LaRoque. So there has been an ongoing conversation both at the staff level and then with council publicly about how to address the deficit in Victoria by the Bay. One of these discussions looked at the different options to which eliminating irrigation and maintenance could take place. Arbor Park would save 37,000, Victoria Park 48,000, and so on. Streetlights 50,000, but residential streets was at 260,000, and the gap we need to close is roughly 215,000 in that neighborhood. So really the only way to close the financial gap was to stop the maintenance and irrigation on the planter strips of the residential streets. That was the only way within the realm of possibilities to make the finances of the district whole. The other thing is it was clear that, as has been discussed a short while ago, converting the turf at some point to drought tolerant landscaping probably was the way to go in the future. And by cutting services on the planter strips, then the residents could have the choice whether or not they wanted to continue to irrigate and maintain the planter strips or ask the HOA to do it collectively. So there was a whole series of sort of thought processes and reasoning that all pointed to the residential streets, but it was discussed and in some detail, and I think fairly carefully thought out. Now, with regards to the proposed LLAD coordinator position, this is something staff has recommended to council. And in fact, based on some accounting we've been doing, the only change currently would be to what's called District 10, which is the citywide parks. There'd be no difference in cost to basically the 5 districts. And it's because we'd be going through a restructuring process where we would centralize the decision-making and administration of the district under this individual, and then shift other people to other functions that the city performs. And then if I understood your last question, we are going to post this meeting on the city's website, which will include, the questions and answers. So please let me know if I missed any of your questions. Thank you.
Yes. I have Ms. Carol Mostwalker.
Yeah, hi, this is Stephen Walker, and I would like to echo exactly what the last 2 speakers were discussing and what their proposal was, because we've been living here for 21 years and we feel that the maintenance of the parks and the strips have been somewhat abysmal. I mean, there's broken lights everywhere, the grass is dead everywhere, and it feels like that they're overworking everything. They overwork the grass. But what it just feels like is this is a sort of a threat to homeowners from the city of Hercules, and it doesn't seem right at all. And also, it seems last time we had this conversation, last time I made the same comment, was we voted against the assessment last time, and now we're asking to be voted again as though we didn't understand the question, what was in front of us. But we also mentioned that the landscaper was at the table, and they're at the table again. And this seems like a big conflict of interest. When you're asking for us to be, raise taxes for the community, and the person that is responsible for maintaining that, those strips and the company is at the table. I don't see how that's actually, I see that as a conflict of interest. If you're going to maybe go out to bid and get different bids, but the last time we talked, it sounded like Rod, the company has been with you guys for like 10 years and you haven't even had a new assessment. So, I mean, it just seems very unfair. And then recently, of course, you guys trimmed a whole bunch of trees in the park due to issues. But you're taking so many trees, you damaged so many trees, you over trimmed the trees. And now we're asking the same maintenance company, hey, we need more money to do this, or we're going to cut off services. It doesn't sound right to me at all. Thank you.
Oh, okay. Thank you for your comments, Mr. Walker. So those are really, challenging issues you bring up. So this is the second time the city has gone out to the property owners of Victoria with an assessment. And the first time, the city did its best to explain the situation and asked the voters, if they wanted to increase rates, but it was based on, reasoning, explaining the situation and that the fund was in a deficit, but it didn't pass, and it didn't pass by a wide margin. So what could possibly be done to fix this issue? So now the city is going out a second time, and if the residents don't vote the increase, the only way to balance the budget is to cut the services. And so we're not trying to threaten anyone. We're just trying to be good stewards of the taxpayer dollars. We can't afford to continue to subsidize the district with the general fund, which everybody pays into. So regarding the landscaper, you are correct. They've been here a very, very long time. If you, again, with a challenging question here, I'm going to respond. If you look here up on the podium, the landscaper isn't here. He's not at the table. The landscaper is out actually in the audience. And that's because if there's any specific questions that members of the public want to ask, we want to make sure they're here to give the best answer possible. And there are a lot of details involved in the work they do. And so the landscaping company, by the way, has not gotten an increase in 5 years. The cities hold their contract to the same amount for 5 years. No CPI increases or anything. However, we are, as you mentioned, planning out to go to bid again to test the market, if you will, with some trepidation because of the rate increases we could see. And that, again, is in accordance as well with the third-party Baker Tilly study that was completed. So I hope these have adequately answered your questions.
And one other thing that I would add to that, I agree with everything the Public Works Director said. And, I'm sorry, it sounds like a threat. It's not intended to be a threat. It is, there are other costs except for the landscaping that contributed to the overruns, like utilities, like watering. So it's not just the actual landscaper, but other things that contributed to the overage. So thank you. Do we have any other raised hands?
No one from attendees would like to talk, but I have two questions from residents anonymous. And can I read the questions?
Yes.
Yeah. So the first one, so you are telling us to pay $12.50 a month so that you can mow the small strip in front of my house?
That is accurate. I believe it makes sense for someone to look at the strip, consider whether they want to water it and mow it monthly for the first year, and then, once a year, do weed abatement, herbicide, aerate, and fertilize it. That's the service that is currently being provided. I think that's an excellent way to decide whether or not you want to vote for the increase. There's a couple of things being close to this issue that I think is really important to mention. The first is that if the measure or if the balloting process doesn't pass, then if each property owner maintains the planter strip in front of their house, there's a chance for a lot of inconsistency. And to me, as a property owner, with my own home and wanting to protect my property values, that's something, frankly, I would be concerned about. So I do want to share that. So one option, of course, would be to ask the HOA if they would collectively maintain the planter strips in your neighborhood. And then, though it does go up another $12.50 the second year, in the interest of transparency here, for a total of $25 a month over a 2-year period. So you are correct, $12.50 a month to maintain and water the planter strip in front of your house, but not the trees. We did consult with an arborist who indicated that all the trees should survive for the most part if the watering is turned off, but they do recommend if property owners are irrigating the planter strip that they water the tree as well. So thank you.
I have a second question. How many times a week are the most strips in front of of our homes supposed to be watered?
Great question. So I think we better ask the irrigation contractor to come up to make sure we give an accurate answer on that.
What was the question again? I'm sorry.
How many times a week are the most strips in front of our homes supposed to be watered?
So right now we are watering, oh, sorry.
Yeah.
Oh, I'm sorry.
It's on.
As of right now, we're watering twice a week to conserve water.
So I would add as well that the watering isn't done all at once. It's been programmed to water each event. It waters 3 times throughout the night. So the issue is that the turf is dense, it's very thirsty, and the planter strips are only 4 to 5 feet wide. So it's near impossible to irrigate them without having spray and runoff, which is what's causing, frankly, the water waste that you're seeing out there. It's the nature of the turf and also the shape of the planter strip. But what we're doing to try to make the water go as far as possible is watering it 3 times on the day it's watered and not just once.
Right, Mike? In order to conserve water, that's what we've been doing, multiple start times. If not, you would have a lot of runoff. So.
Next question. LLD special benefit assessment. How much is the general benefit amount, dollar and percentage? Will this also go up?
This would be a question for Ed Espinoza, who's the district lighting and landscaping engineer.
Thank you, Mike. That's an excellent question. So that's absolutely correct. The LLD is a special benefit assessment and therefore subject to the requirements of Prop 218. And one of those requirements is to quantify and separate general benefit and special benefit. For the Victoria by the Bay Landscape and Lighting Assessment District, there are improvements that provide a benefit beyond the Victoria by the Bay neighborhood, and therefore are not funded by the Victoria by the Bay Landscape and Lighting Assessment District. Those being Shoreline Park and the arterial roadways along San Pablo roadway. The landscaping adjacent to the Victoria by the Bay neighborhoods are not funded directly by the Victoria by the Bay LLAD. So the improvements that are funded by the Victoria by the Bay Landscape and Lighting Assessment District are considered to be local in nature, and therefore virtually all of the benefit is to the properties within the district boundaries or within the Victoria by the Bay neighborhood. And so with that said, the general benefit percentage that's been attributed to this district is 2%. And the city therefore contributes between $13,000 and $14,000 annually to fund the in-tract residential landscape areas, the smaller neighborhood parks, and also the street lighting within the residential neighborhoods. And then in regard to the last question, will this also go up? The percentage is anticipated to remain the same. However, it will increase, the dollar amount will increase as the budget increases. So the city's dollar contribution is expected to go up commensurately with maintenance costs.
Thank you. And so how many If I can ask you, Shiva, how many raised hands do we have?
I still have Mr. Most Walker's hand, raised hand, and the first person, JL, who talked. I don't know if they want to talk or, let me see.
And so what I'll say is because of our stop time, we're going to have to let those be the last questions if they indeed have questions. But if there are other questions, please feel free to reach out to us and we'll definitely get back to you and provide you with a response. Like the Public Works Director talked about, we're keeping a record of all of these questions on our website, victoriallad.com. We have a running list of all of the reports, staff reports, questions, meetings, tapes. It's just a treasure trove of information that if you have time and would like to go through that, or just give us a telephone call. But we'll go back to our final question at this point.
Mr. Most Walker, do you have a question?
Yeah, this is Carol, Carol Most. So my question is, did the city engage in a conversation with East Bay Mud with the lawn conversion project? And if so, how their reimbursement program would offset some of the costs for the city to do this?
Thank you, Ms. Moswalker. So we have seen their website, which does not include government agencies. However, it's something we will be looking into in the future. Once the city's finances are in order, a rebate can be helpful, but it's going to come nowhere near funding, $1,500 per planter strip in front of each home.
And so we're going to have to let that be our last. I'm sorry, go ahead, Ms.
I just want to say one more comment, and if we did the city do a long-term like cost analysis, like the big picture over time, and figure out what the savings would be in the long term. So, okay,
So we do an assessment and a long-term view, essentially, but we just haven't found the right program that's offered to public agencies for replacement. We're continuing to look for that. We actually are looking for some grant resources to do that. But that's the long-term kind of sustainability view that we're looking at for this district and citywide as well, that come with some capital outlay. I don't believe that there's a program that doesn't require any city capital outlay, which is the next step after we get the finances in order and help to cure the deficit. But we definitely have plans to improve the sustainability of Victoria by the Bay and all of our districts. So thank you for your forward thinking. We share your questions and issues, and we are looking for a long-term solution for everyone. That's going to have to be our last question for tonight. But again, if we can go to the next slide, please. If we can go back to our presentation. For the questions about landscaping, street lighting, parks, and maintenance, I'm going to have people to contact our Public Works Director, and here's the information, if we can go back to that. On the screen that Shiva will get to pretty quickly. And then if there are questions about the assessment and the process and voting, Ed Espinosa, who's our consultant, is his information is there. We also have copies of this presentation will be on our website after this meeting. The recording will be on our website after the meeting. For people who are here in person, we have copies of the report that have contact information and opportunities to provide us with other questions. And we'll definitely make it a point to get back to the residents. So this is probably the last slide. Keep going. Keep going.
One more.
One more. One more.
One more.
One more.
There it
There
is.
you go. Sorry it took so long, but this is the information. If you have anything else that you'd like to ask us, we'd be happy to answer. We definitely welcome questions about this as we work towards a resolution and solution. So thank you guys very much. Thank you for taking your time to come out. Thank you for taking your time to participate via Zoom. And we look forward to hearing from you as we march towards the public hearing on June 25th. So thank you very much. And that will end the meeting tonight. Thank you. The next meeting is the public hearing, which is June 25th. But we'd be happy to answer any questions or anything that you have between now and then. So thank you. Thank you for coming.